Good morning, and welcome to the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. We are a philosophically based spiritual community founded on existential philosophy and feminist principles, and dedicated to human liberation and the protection of the natural world. My name is Patton White, and I will be facilitating this morning's celebration of life. We make our spiritual home in the old stone church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this special place. We acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Muskogee Creek people. We support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. This morning's opening words are drawn from a body of work that I have been pursuing, I should say, in the work that I do as a somatic-based movement practitioner. And this is from the work referencing the work of Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen and her work called Body-Mind Centering. In terms of her work, she examines the relationship between the body and the mind through various systems within the body. And one of those systems is the fluids system. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what she says about cellular fluid. Cells are the microcosm of our individual self. Each cell is an aspect of our self, of our unconscious and conscious behavior, and manifests as both our body and our mind. Just as the flower has a center and blossoms from core to distal with petals unfolding from its center, so can we as humans open from the depth of embodied cellular presence. We can become embodied presence just like a flower in bloom. The interplay between our unconsciousness and conscious mind is fluid and flows in both directions all the time. The conscious and unconscious are a continuum of one mind. They are each the shadow or support of the movement and expression of the other. It is in the shifting and alternating between the listening and expressing roles within the continuum that we know ourselves and feel strong and free in mind, emotions, and spirit. So with that little contextual piece, I'm going to invite everybody to take a moment to close your eyes and wherever you may be, if you're seated, if you're standing, whatever, to just close your eyes and allow your mind and body to focus your attention at the cellular level. And again, this is that idea of being, simply being, and awareness of one's self. Take a couple of deep breaths and use that imagery of the breathing of air in and out as if you are able to see at that cellular level or experience at that cellular level the cellular breathing, the contraction and the expansion that's constantly taking place. Allowing ourselves to know of our existence, to be aware, and to simply have no judgment about that whatsoever. That is at the heart of at least my understanding of existentialism. We are aware. We are constantly finding our place in the world. We have another new recorded song. This one is entitled Come and Go With Me, and it is being led by Jean Heinrich with our singers Carol Harder, Robert Stewart, and Mary Howard, and our musicians Andy Weiskopf and Craig Rafuse. Please rise and body your spirit as you are willing and able, and join in humming along or singing along or just listening. Enjoy. Thank you so much to the musicians for another rousing song. Our speaker today, we are welcoming back Anthony Knight, who we have had visit us at the First E many times. Anthony Knight is the president and CEO of the Baton Foundation, a Georgian nonprofit organization that serves the emotional, intellectual, and cultural needs of Black boys in grades 5 through 9. Before founding the foundation, Mr. Knight worked for 22 years as a museum educator and consultant. Mr. Knight has extensive experience with and interest in African American history and culture, public and living history, informal education, and Black youth. Mr. Knight's work with the Baton Foundation reflects his ongoing interest in the issues and practices related to the collecting, preservation, and interpretation of information about and material culture from the African diaspora. Mr. Knight's undergraduate work was in Spanish and English at Ohio Wesleyan University, and his graduate work was in museum education at the George Washington University. Mr. Knight also holds a degree in Spanish to English translation from the Núcleo de Estudios Lingüísticos y Sociales, Caracas, Venezuela. Mr. Knight is a New York City native. Please join me in welcoming back Anthony Knight.
Good morning, First E family. I hope you're doing well. It is always a joy to meet with you on Sundays, and I'm looking forward to our conversation at the end of my talk. Please bear with me. I have a new phone case, and it's a little weird. But anyway, hopefully everything will go smoothly and without a hitch. My talk for today is This Is Not Who We Are, Thoughts on Living Up to Who We Are as Human Beings. So I'm going to begin by reading a quote. Here we go. Where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. Where community is to be formed, common memory must be created. And that's a quote by George Erasmus, co-chair of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples in Canada. A friend sent a TEDx video to me a couple of weeks ago, and the speaker referenced this quote. I was immediately struck by its simple truth and thought to myself, aha, so this is the crux of the race problem here in the United States. For whatever other cultural issues may be at play, class, wealth, education, religion, politics, you name it, the bottom line is that the United States is made up of many cultures, each with its own story, disparate stories. Last month, I watched in horror, as I'm sure many of you did, as images of mounted Border Patrol police flashed across my television screen. I was transfixed as I viewed recorded video of officers chasing down, grabbing, and whipping Black Haitians seeking asylum in the United States. Immediately, my mind was transported back to the period of Black enslavement in this country's history. I thought about the multitudes of Black women, men, and children who were hunted down and rounded up in ways eerily similar to what I was seeing on my television screen in 2021. Then, the perpetrators of this brutish behavior were slave patrollers, or paddy rollers, the name by which they were more commonly known. At the time, their actions were legal. Moreover, as Blacks were not considered citizens, free or enslaved, how white people treated them was of little consequence, a fact that would be etched into law with the Dred Scott Supreme Court decision in 1856. Slave patrollers were an important element of antebellum society. Not only did they track down and return stolen property, enslaved Blacks were accused of stealing property themselves when they ran away, paddy rollers were an effective deterrent. Their brand of terror and violence kept many enslaved Blacks from even thinking about running away. Further, when Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850, their reach was broadened. Not only could they wantonly impose their vigilante law within the borders of slave states, now they could legally search for and retrieve enslaved blacks nationally. For whereas before, enslaved blacks who made the decision to free themselves could have reasonable assurance of finding some relief in northern cities, they now had to think about cities further north, that is Canada. Over the course of the week or so, the ratings-obsessed media focused its attention on the Haitian immigrants. I began thinking about the narratives taking shape, rather. Most Haitians who presented at the border did not come directly from Haiti. Instead, they mostly came from countries in Central and South America, as that is why they were at the southern border. Many had been living in those countries for years, following the destruction caused by Hurricane Matthew in 2016. Moreover, with little prospect of returning to Haiti in the near future, given recent political and natural events, many opted for a chance at a more secure life in the United States. United States citizens, on the other hand, only saw hordes of black people, black Haitians no less, trying to get into their country. And while I don't know what it's like to live in a city along the southern border, I was raised in a city into which hundreds of people immigrated every day. Many of those individuals are white, and do so illegally by overstaying their visas. Yet in all my years living in New York, I never saw white illegal immigrants treated in the same way I saw Haitian immigrants treated a couple of weeks ago. Two different stories. Within a day or so of the Haitian immigrant story breaking, Joe Scarborough, co-host of MSNBC's morning show, Morning Joe, felt it necessary to clarify a fact being put forward in the media about the Border Patrol police and their treatment of Haitian immigrants. Let's be clear, he said, and quite forcefully, I remember. They were not using whips. Those were reins. What the hell? I thought. For does it matter if the police officers were using actual whips or horse reins? Last I checked, horse reins are generally made from leather, and I certainly wouldn't want anyone whipping me with a horse rein. The comment stunned me as Scarborough fashions himself an intellectual and an evolved human being and with deep wells of human compassion, I guess because he's married to Mika Brzezinski, who knows? In that moment, though, the real Joe Scarborough shone through, and his story was revealed. Essentially, he was saying, I'm okay beating Haitians with horse reins, just not whips. I can only conclude that because horse reins are made to use with animals most of us love and revere, they're okay. However, whips remind us of the brutality of slavery. Not okay. Better to beat a black person with reins. It's more humane. Well, at least that's how I interpreted his remark. We often hear politicians, black and white alike, radio broadcasters, educators, clergy, an array of individuals from all walks of life, make the remark when confronted with behavior in the United States that is particularly abhorrent, quote, that's not who we are. We're better than that, unquote. Each time I hear this, I almost want to burst into flames. But each time I hear this, I'm reminded of the inadequacies of this country's education system and the degree to which we all have been brainwashed. There is no possible way for a person to have a full understanding of this country's history and to be fully present in the truth of this country's history and at the same time doubt the extreme violence and terror its government and citizens have visited upon members of its population. From the days long before the country was officially created to the country we know and in which we exist today, the United States has always engaged in unimaginable violence, terror, deceit, oppression, and criminal and anti-democratic behavior. It is in the country's DNA, and it is who we are. To my way of thinking, it is better to accept that fact and to work to create a new truth than to continually lie about a so-called truth that never existed and still does not. I am now, like many of you guys, I am now at the point in my life where there is more road behind me than in front of me. Regardless of my so-called good genes or excellent health, I will most likely not live another 60 years, and that's okay with me. Another 30 to 35 would be plenty. I doubt that within that time, I will live to see this country transform itself into a more honest and humane nation. Theoretically, it is possible. However, given what I see around me, it's unlikely. What's that saying? If it walks and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. Well, the United States may not be a duck. Its recent behavior, however, is reminiscent of the behaviors that led the country to a bloody civil war. Its dead only outnumbered now by COVID-19 deaths. Yes, it is tragic indeed. A country whose founding documents speak to the inherent nature of freedom for all men and proclaim the democratic principles by which they endeavor to live has seldom respected or done either. In that TEDx video I referenced at the beginning of this talk, the speaker referred to the Declaration of Independence. He directed the audience's attention to a sentence just a few paragraphs down from the gobbledygook about self-evident truths and governments that derive their powers from the consent of the governed, blah, blah, blah. I was stunned, as I had never noticed the sentence before. It reads, quote, "He, King George III, has excited domestic insurrections among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions." Wow. Not only is the document clearly drafted for the interests of white, wealthy, male landowners, we can't forget that it excludes women and blacks and refers to the individuals whose land they stole as savages and accuses them of being the most violent creatures of all time. Really? There are at least 5 stories here. The stories of white, wealthy males, landowners, poor whites in general, women, blacks, and Native Americans. Which one is the truth? Well, they all are. Given this fact of U.S. history, I shudder to think how we craft a common memory, a unified past. It seems to be the quintessential impossible dream. Human beings often rise to the occasion when confronted with impossible odds. And while I'm not a betting man, I do know that we all are the same. We come from the same place, and we return there after death. Whatever and wherever there is, We're all going there. I am very unsure, though, about this country's future trajectory. I really am. However, I must maintain my belief that everything has meaning. And I really do believe that. Everything has meaning. And everything, in the end, will be all right. Thank you, First E. I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Anthony. We always love hearing what you have to share with us. Please join us on Zoom immediately following today's broadcast for our meet and greet, where we will be discussing the topics that Anthony brought up today, as well as sharing personal joys, sorrows, and concerns. You can find the link to the Zoom meeting in the comments section of today's broadcast. Next week, please join us for the presentation at 11 a.m. by Kathy Mcguire, one of our members here at First E, and she will be talking about journeys in meaning making during COVID. So we hope to either see you on Zoom or next week at 11 a.m. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day today, a great rest of your weekend, and a super week coming up. Thanks so much for being with us today. Bye-bye.